Hello, and welcome to this video about anatomy and descriptive terminology. Descriptive terminology is the language we use to describe parts, position, and the motions of the body. And as you begin to study anatomy, it's important that you become fluent with these terms. In anatomy, we have similar terms to describe the due direction of our bodies. The term cardinal planes refer to the three-dimensional planes as they cross the midline of our body. The transverse plane cuts the body in the top and lower half, just like a magician would do when they're doing a magic trick. The frontal plane dissects the body in front and back right through the midline, and the sagittal plane cuts the body between its right and left halves. The term cardinal plane refers to these planes as they cross the midline, but you can also talk about joints moving in different planes when they're not on the midline as well. As an example, hip flexion can be said to be happening in the sagittal plane. Let's take a look at this one instead. And even though it's not happening directly in the midline of the body, we can still say it's movement in the sagittal plane. It's kind of like how we may talk about the post office is north of the library. Even though it's not due north, it's still a way we can describe the language and understand where something is. For biomechanical analysis of the lifts and for understanding the true function of muscles and muscle groups, familiarity with these planes is paramount. Also notice that in each picture, the person is in the same position. It's called the anatomical position. And when you're thinking about a joint's motion or how to be choosing anatomical words to describe joint positions, make sure you are always starting with this important position. Because the body is a three-dimensional object that can move in a million different combinations of ways, we need some pretty specific terms to describe it as we study it. The anatomical position is the position from which every other movement is gauged. It's just like the "You Are Here" tab on a map. It's the starting line. We designate this body position with the body standing upright, eyes facing forward, feet parallel and close together, arms at the sides of the body, and palms facing forward or supinated. So what does all of this have to do with barbell lifts? Well, think about how many planes the barbell lifts move in. What about the squat, the press, the bench, and the deadlift? By definition, a compound movement equals moving in as many planes as possible. And because these lifts move in all three of our cardinal planes, that's exactly the reason we choose them. They're very effective. And as such, when you begin to study the barbell lifts, you might sketch a lift in 1 or 2 dimensions. But remember, the lifts are happening in all 3 planes. Let's take a look at these 3 pictures. This view of the skeleton is in the sagittal plane. You may look at the squat from this position, but remember, it's only telling part of the story. Here is the frontal plane. And here is an unusual picture of the transverse plane. Think about the movements and think about what happens at each plane as they're performed. There's another group of descriptive terminology terms we need to discuss. These terms are about the relationship of one body part to another, and they are meant to be specific, exact, so that surgeons can use them to describe and document a surgery after they've finished. Just like a compass that helps us know direction of things in relation to our body position on the planet, these words help us to know and be very specific about what we are studying or a movement or exactly where we are on a 3D object. Let's take a look at them. Medial refers to a location of a position that's closer toward the midline, while lateral refers to a position that's farther away from the midline. So I can say, as an example, that my ear is lateral to my nose, or that my nose is medial to my ear. Anterior refers to the front of the body or a position that's closer to the front than another. So my sternum is anterior to my heart. Posterior refers to a position in the back of the body or a position towards the back. So my spine is posterior to my heart. Ventral is a synonym for anterior, and dorsal is a synonym for posterior, just to make things a little bit more confusing. But we actually use the terms ventral and dorsal and strange exceptions with the hand and feet, which seems to be flipped when you first think about it. But if you remember that we determine these directions from the anatomical position, it makes a little bit of sense. Distal and proximal are used to explain positions of our extremities or on our appendicular skeleton usually. Our skeleton is made of our axillary skeleton, which is our trunk, and our appendicular skeleton, which is the arms and legs, our extremities. So I can say that my hand is distal to my shoulder, or that my shoulder is proximal to my hand. Superior describes a position above a structure and inferior below. So my head is superior to my chest, and my chest is inferior to my head. Caudal means towards the feet. Cranial means towards the head. Superficial and deep are terms used to describe the depth towards the center of our body. So my skin is superficial to my blood vessels, while my heart is deep to my chest or my rib cage. In conclusion, as you study anatomy, try to use these terms as much as possible. Use them in everyday life, use them when you look at a lift, and use them when you describe what a joint is doing. Good luck.